Good evening, everyone. We would like to, as Scouts of Australia, we would like to acknowledge Australia's First Nations people, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, as the traditional custodians of this land, especially including the Narragansett people who call this area home. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We are grateful to do our scouting in this country. We commit to use its resources wisely and develop our understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. We also acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. I'd like to welcome Joe to the stage to join me. My name is Nat, and this is Joe. We're both SMEG students and members of the local scout group First Kosciuszko. We request that all mobile phones please be turned off. Bathrooms are located outside the shed around to the left if you need them. We would like to take this opportunity to thank Snow Mountains Grammar School, Scouts Australia, and most importantly, Dr. Gareth Andrews and Dr. Richard Stephenson for organising this event and providing this amazing opportunity. As Scouts, there is a focus on creating a better world, respecting and looking after the environment and understanding our impact. In order to further understand this impact we have on the Antarctic environment, the explorers are carrying climate monitoring equipment with them on their journey.
Scouts gives us skills for life. These explorers are both former Scouts. They have continued to use the sense of adventure and skills from Scouts for bigger and better adventures throughout their adult life. They have used these skills to explore uncharted territory in Iceland and to be able to ski to the North Pole. Now, to add to the list, they are going to complete the first unsupported crossing of Antarctica. Both Gareth and Richard are also medical doctors. They've been on the front line of the COVID pandemic response in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK.
We would now like to invite Eleanor Hewitt, the Chair of the National Rover Council, to the stage to present. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me first begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the land which we're meeting on today, the Narragansett people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. My name is Eleanor Hewitt and I'm the Chair of the Scouts Australia National Rover Council, and I'm delighted to be here this evening on behalf of the Chief Commissioner of Scouts Australia. Scouts Australia is delighted to be community partner of the last Great First. Not only are many of us, frankly, just big fans of Antarctica snow and anything involving mountains, we're also excited to see Gareth and Richard, our newest ambassadors of Scouts Australia, inspire Scouts across the country to embark on their own last Great First. We recognise the significance that role models play in inspiring and motivating our Scouts to achieve great things. In introducing our explorers, I've been asked to share my own experience with this. 8 years ago, I met another Scouts Australia ambassador, Andrew Locke. Andrew was the first Australian to climb all 14 8,000-metre peaks, and he helped out on a training program for alpine activities for venturers and rovers in the ACT that I'd signed up to. Whilst Andrew didn't come along on all our trips, the impact he had on me was massive. Not only did I resonate with his dislike of walking up hills, he made me realise that the mountaineers you read about in books are real, normal people with big goals. What followed from that program and meeting Andrew was a lot of time by me spent in the mountains having fun across the world, including in 2018 when I led the first Scouts Australian expedition to climb Baden Pass Scout Peak in Nepal. This is BP Peak. Compared to other mountains in the Himalayas, it's pretty tiny at 5,800 metres. But if you want to compare it to terms closer to home, it's 2.6 times the height of Mount Kosciuszko. And much to my surprise, 15 other rovers, so 18 to 26-year-olds, decided to join me on this expedition. And in November 2018, we set off from Kathmandu to the Langtung Valley. After the bumpiest and most terrifying bus trip any of us ever had, we set off on our week-long trip to the base of the mountain. We started hiking up narrow valleys through rainforests filled with monkeys and all the way up to vast wide plains with a lot of overly curious yaks who like to poke their head into your tent as you were sleeping. We spent some time acclimatizing by climbing the nearby mountains and trying to get our bodies used to the lack of oxygen in the air. Here we are on top of Cajun-Ree, a 4,800 metre peak. And you can see the tiny little white mountain in the background, and that was BP Peak. And the next day, we climbed Tresecco-Ree, a 5,000 metre peak. And it had one of the best views that I've ever seen from Lungtung. This is Lungtung-Ree, it's a 7,000 metre peak. And that eagle there that you can see followed us the entire way up the 6-hour hike. After a day of rest, sleeping and eating copious amounts of food, including yak cheese pizza, we set off to reach the camp that we will climb BP Peak from. The little white triangle you can see in that picture is BP Peak. And the white lines that you can see on the slope, they're frozen waterfalls, which gives you a pretty good indication of the fun we were in for the next day. Climbing up that hill felt a lot like hiking through Australia. There was a lot of scrub, a lot of nice looking plants, which when you touched them or brushed them were actually covered in prickles. It felt like bush bashing through the lower parts of Kosciuszko or the Buttawangs. And while there were no snakes, there's something worse than snakes in Nepal, which are yaks. And going around a corner and seeing a yak who was asleep and you just woken up was an experience, because running at 4,500 metres away from a chasing yak is quite difficult. But we got to the camp and we watched the sunset over Lungtung-Ree, which is the mountain we saw the previous 2 days. So the next day, we tried to adjust to living at 5,000 metres, which is a lot harder than it sounds. Eating food is very difficult. Getting out of bed is even harder. Getting up too quickly will often leave you breathless and a bit dizzy. Our Nepalese guides run a puja ceremony. It's a Sherpa tradition to pray for safety on the mountain. And here we are with our guides after the puja ceremony. That night, we tried to get some sleep and woke up at 1 a.m. to get going. At 2 a.m, we scrambled up loose rocks and we reached the bottom of the mountain. It was very cold. The sun came up at 6:30 that morning, but the gully we were in received no sun. By that point, it's safe to say that all I wanted to do was be back in my warm sleeping bag, or frankly, be anywhere but on the side of that mountain. It was so cold that the water we had packed hours before was already frozen solid. Muesli bars, when they're frozen, are quite difficult to eat. You feel like you're going to snap your teeth off. So none of us drank any water or really ate any food that day. It was a steep, icy climb with lots of loose rocks and chunks of ice ready to fall down on you at any moment. But it finished with a climb up a beautiful snowy slope. Not everyone was able to get to the summit that day, but 2 of the team got to the top. You can see in the next slide, that's Matt. Matt was the youngest member of our team. And on the next slide, that's Matt and our guide Noam. Noam has now climbed Everest, I think 12 times, and his claim to fame that he told us was that he did a handstand on top of Mount Everest. We never saw photographic evidence, but he did do lots of handstands around camp, so who knows. The view from the top was incredible. The tall pyramid Toblerone looking mountain in the distance there is Makalu, one of the 14 8,000 metre peaks that Andrew Locke had climbed. After a final night of sleeping on the mountain, we headed back down. It was cold, but going down is a lot easier than going up in altitude. The oxygen in the air felt like luxury as we're walking back down the valley. And it's safe to say we walked down a lot quicker than it took us to walk up. And here's some of the team on our last night before returning back to Kathmandu for some long-awaited showers. When we arrived back at Kathmandu, we all got jumped in the shower, but unfortunately the hotel ran out of hot water because we had used it so much. Now, I never thought I'd be comparing myself to polar explorers, but here we are. Much like me, our explorers also learnt their love of adventure and their skills through Scouts. It equipped them with the skills needed to survive in the wilderness across the world, and it taught them about risk and how we can mitigate it. Soon, they will head off on their adventure, the last great first, where they will embark on the first fully unsupported coast-to-coast crossing of Antarctica. For where over 110 days, the explorers will traverse 2,600 kilometres of frozen, unforgiving wilderness, burning 7,000 calories a day, hauling 200-kilo sleds, containing all the equipment required for the adventure. If successful, it will be one of the greatest human feats of endurance to date, breaking the world record for the longest unsupported polar expedition. Scouts Australia is proud to be supporting the last Great First expedition. Invested as members of Scouts Australia early this year, Richard and Gareth will demonstrate many of Scouts Australia's values and attributes, including courage, resilience, empowerment, responsibility, and self-confidence, fueled by teamwork, passion, and commitment during their time in Antarctica. We can't wait to follow you along, and we wish you the best of luck and stay safe.
Thank you, Eleanor. And thank you to the Scouts that introduced us today and did the welcome to country. Rich and I are incredibly proud to be here in the Snowy Mountains. It's the home of Australian polar exploration. All the great Australian polar explorers have spent time training here, and it's a privilege to be here and train here as well. And thanks so much to Scouts Australia for having us. We're really looking forward to tomorrow, getting out in the snow with the Scouts, and thank you so much to Snowy Mountains Grammar School for hosting us. We're going to take you on a journey tonight into Antarctica, into our expedition that will attempt to be the first team in history to ski all the way across the continent with no outside support under human power alone. And just to set the scene, I want you to imagine walking 2,600 kilometers, same distance from Adelaide to Cairns. Now imagine it's across snow and ice, it's through unexplored mountains and across glaciers. Still air temperature around you is between -20 and -40. Polar storms are frequent and dangerous, and winds can blow up to 200 kilometers an hour. You drag behind you a sled that's your life raft. Contains everything you need to survive for 3.5 months. And the only person you have to rely on is the person standing next to you, your best mate, your teammate. And you've got to trek 26 kilometers every day for 100 days or food or longer. And that's the challenge that we face heading into Antarctica. And we're going to show you a short video, and then we'll tell you a little bit more about the expedition. There's the sun, and there's some blue sky. There's the sun, and there's some blue sky. We've had rain, heavy rain, snow, and we've pretty much been skiing in a whiteout. So we're hoping for a break in the weather. Everything we do now is money in the bank, and it's just going to make us stronger for Antarctica. So it's going to be quite a tough day ahead, but we're just going to pack up and get out. We're getting a little bit worn down by the fact that everything's wet. All our kit, sleeping bags, sleeping mats, and we're just a bit worried that we've got another 2 weeks now.
I'm now going to count the sugar cubes, because in the last couple of days we've repeatedly wondered how many little cubes of sugar we're allowed in our tea. And we don't know the answer because we don't know how many sugar cubes we've got.
Sort of steep uphill for a couple of K today. Yeah. We're now pretty much plateauing out. We're at 16:27 now.
We had an arbitrary goal of getting to the top in the highest point in this far away, but that was really caveated by the fact that we're here to train and to make sure that we're ready for when we get to Antarctica. This is Richard's bed. This is the map reading room. This is the laundry. And to the kitchen. Our sleds at the moment aren't Antarctic weight. They're about 100 kilos. They'll probably be 170 in Antarctica.
There's no way that you could kind of theory craft this thing. There's no way we could sit together over a beer or trying to work this stuff out. The only way to do it is just to be here and experience it, and I think that's absolutely valuable.
Last night was probably the most terrifying night I've ever had in a tent. These last days that, especially the last ski, you start to reflect on everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks and the expedition itself, and start to look forward to what's coming. One of the other big things that has been weighing on both our minds is, are we physically robust enough to handle a 200 kilo sled for 2,600 kilometers across Antarctica? And being out here has really confirmed to us that it's possible. Ski crossing of Antarctica, and the longest polar expedition in modern history. Now we're going to take you through a map of the expedition.
So just to orientate you guys a wee bit to Antarctica, just for those of you that don't necessarily know it super well. So you tend to see Antarctica kind of mapped out like this. You've got the South Pole right in the middle. You've got the Antarctic Peninsula pointing up to the top left-hand corner of the picture. And coming down, which you can't see in this picture, is the bottom end of South America. So across the kind of top of this slide, you've got the Atlantic Ocean, and then you've got the Pacific Ocean, New Zealand and Australia off the bottom of the slide. So what we want to do is to ski from the true coast to the true coast of Antarctica. Now, Antarctica is an enormous, enormous continent. The majority of the continent is made up of ice cap. You have the enormous Antarctic ice cap that's glacial ice, that's snow that's fallen to the ground and formed these enormous kilometers thick ice sheets covering rock. But it also spreads out, the ice sheet spreads through the retaining mountains down to the coast, and in two particularly enormous areas it flows out over the sea and forms these enormous ice shelves. So Antarctica really is a continent both of the continental ice, but also of these enormous ice shelves. So what we want to do is to ski from the true coastline to the true coastline. So we want to start at the Bay of Wales, down the bottom of the picture there, and that's on the coast of the Ross Ice Shelf, right down at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. We're going to go about 700 kilometers across the Ross Ice Shelf until we reach the Transantarctic Mountains. So it'll be purely flat the entire way, at sea level the whole way. As we reach the base of the Transantarctic Mountains, we're going to travel up a previously unexplored glacier through the Transantarctic Mountains. And we're going to, over the course of about 150 kilometers, we're going to gain about 3,000 meters of height. Antarctica is a continent of extremes. It's the coldest continent on Earth, it's the windiest continent on Earth, but it's also the driest continent on Earth, and it's actually the highest continent on Earth. The vast majority of the Antarctic plateau is sitting at around the 3,000 meter mark. So it's an enormous amount of area, really quite high up. Once we reach the Antarctic plateau, we're going to ski to the South Pole. And then when we get to the South Pole, it's downhill all the way from there. We turn north and we ski along the plateau some more, then drop down through some more retaining mountains onto what's called the Ronnie-Filchner ice shelf, which is that other enormous ice shelf sitting down at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean there. We're going to ski along that for another sort of 500 kilometers, finishing on the seaward side of Berkner Island, on the shores of the Weddell Sea, on the opposite side of the continent. So that's a total distance of 2,600 kilometers. We're going to do about 110 days. And over the course of the next sort of 20, 25 minutes, we want to take you through some of the more facets of the expedition. I'm just going to let Gareth introduce some of the other concepts that we'd like to introduce you to that are part of the Last Great First.
Whenever someone comes along and suggests such an audacious challenge as this, there's the age-old question of why. You know, we get asked why all the time. And you know, there are three big reasons why for us. The first is to be the first people to cross the continent unsupported. to push the boundaries of what it means to be human from a physical and mental perspective. Secondly, we have the unique opportunity to gain 110 days of climate data across a transect of Antarctica. And we're going to talk a little bit more about our science program in just a second. And thirdly, our community and our work with Scouts Australia. We've got the opportunity to inspire 60,000 Scouts across Australia to reach what they're most passionate about. And I would implore all of you in the room today to, chase your dreams, however big and ridiculous they may seem, just get out there and get after it, because, that's what we think is the best thing to do. And then even more than that, we have the chance to reach 54 million Scouts, 54 million young people across the whole globe, to inspire them about Antarctica, to inspire them to conserve our planet and Antarctica into the future. And we're going to tell you a little bit more about our science program now.
So, Gareth and I are both, as I'm sure a lot of people in this room are, we're passionate environmentalists, and we're very aware that Antarctica is an incredibly harsh, beautiful environment, but it's also fragile, and it acts as a barometer of the global climate. We're all very aware of the impact that man-made climate change is having on Antarctica. And doing an expedition like this in an area that's an incredible privilege to go and be part of, we wanted to be able to contribute to the fight against climate change. And we started having some discussions with some scientists at the University of Hobart and the Australian Antarctic Division about how we could contribute to it. And, I don't know about you guys, but certainly when I think of Antarctic science, I feel that it's, the global measurements of Antarctic climate and global climate. I wasn't sure what we as two guys just skiing across the continent could contribute to that. In the days of, remote sensing and drones and satellite imaging and all the scientific work that goes on in Antarctica. But, when we talked to the scientists, they were incredibly excited about the opportunity to have scientific data across, as Gareth mentioned, a transect of Antarctica. Most Antarctic climate research is based either on point data, so that's people that are collecting samples at specific areas, specific scientific research stations in Antarctica, or done through remote sensing, so done through satellites. And all of that sort of work all of that produces modeling, and that modeling is then extrapolated. But how do you calibrate all that modeling? And for them, the idea of actually being able to gather real-time surface data about even simple things like wind speed, temperature, but also sort of more detailed stuff like ice crystal formation on the surface, the surface pattern of just sastrugi, which are these ice ridges that build up on Antarctica, almost all we know about sastrugi is done through satellite data, but it needs calibrating to the real world. And some of the other challenges is you take a lot of photographs of white ice from a satellite, right? But how do you know if there's clouds in the picture? Because you can't tell, because the reflection from the ice is so much that they don't cause much in the way of shadows. So actually, it's really hard for scientists remotely to detect a lot of cloud patterns over Antarctica. And actually, somebody standing on the ground and taking photos of the sky is incredibly valuable for them. So we're really excited about the climate data that we're going to be able to collect. We'll be collecting sort of samples as we go. We'll be collecting a lot of information, collecting photographs of specific things as we go, to provide the scientists with ground level information for which they can calibrate their models. And then fundamentally that can feed into our global knowledge about Antarctic climate and be used, more generally in our understanding of the global climate and climate change. And that's something that we're incredibly proud to be able to contribute to.
And so onto our community. Rich and I, when we were growing up, we were Scouts, and it really formed the base of our adventuring lives moving forward. It was the first time we went camping with friends, abseiled down a cliff, paddled a kayak, used a compass, all these amazing skills that you learn as a young person, and then you take forward into your careers as adventurers and as doctors. And we're just incredibly proud to work with the Scouts now. And over the last couple of years, we've been giving webinars about Antarctic science and exploration, and go to the next slide, and spent some time at the various jamborees, teaching expedition skills to the scouts, and it's an extremely important part of the project and what we want the project to be about. And then there's the wider community. There's trying to involve as many people as possible and reach as many people as possible to get involved with the expedition, but also work to conserve Antarctica and our climate that's so very important.
Yep, we're incredibly aware of the scale of the challenge that we're taking on. There's a very good reason that nobody's done this before, and that's because it's really hard. And you know, we're the two guys that are going to be doing the skiing, but we're the tip of an iceberg of a team of people that are helping us out achieve this goal. We're aware that we have to get everything right. We have to get, we have to get every single item of our kit right. We have to get all of our food and nutrition right. We have to get our, our cooking systems, our skiing systems. Everything has to be right. We have to have, good luck with the weather. We have to have good luck with snow conditions for this to work. And the team of people that we've built up behind us, particularly looking at nutrition, which is an incredibly important aspect of this. With all of the different stuff, some of our physical strength and conditioning training, and other aspects of our training, and the entity that has become the Grass Great First. We've got Mark Richardson at the back, who's the chairman of our expedition, and I'm incredibly grateful for him for all of the work he's done, and Andrea Hordener, who's Gareth's wife, who is our dietitian as well, rather handily. So she's been absolutely instrumental in getting everything right. So just to say that what we're doing is very much a culmination of a huge amount of teamwork, and there's a lot of people behind us. I think Eleanor mentioned it in the introduction. Gareth and I are both doctors. Gareth's an anaesthetist and I'm an emergency specialist. And this has been a project that's kind of been brewing for about, I guess, about 4 years now, 3.5 years, when we did our last big expedition across Iceland. And it's been about 3 years in the planning, but one of the reasons that things have been protracted a little bit is because of the global COVID pandemic, and Gareth and I have both been kind of working as doctors on the front line of the pandemic for a wee while. Gareth happened to be in Cardiff in the UK when Britain was particularly badly hit by COVID, and all of our expedition planning pretty much went on hold for a good year or so whilst we sort of prioritised our day jobs for a wee while. But now, touch wood, things are starting to calm down a little bit, and over the last year or so, we've kind of been able to turn our attentions a little bit more back towards our expedition planning and forge forwards with a preparation for the last Great First.
And Rich and I, our team, the team that we have formed over 10 years of adventuring together. Our first expedition was to the magnetic North Pole in 2013. We've crossed Iceland together and been up in the high Arctic many times together. We've been stuck in a tent with polar bears sniffing around outside, and stuck in grade 5 rapids in the middle of rivers in Iceland. And it's over that time that we have formed the bond of the team that we think can go forward and attempt such a massive challenge. And for us, our team has been built on trust and respect. We have complementary skill sets. We're both very calm in a crisis, which is what you need in these situations. And we're both very good at decision making. And but most of all, I think we've got a good sense of humor, and that can get you through most sticky situations. So it's through all these past experiences that have built us towards attempting this great feat. So we just want to put the expedition in a historical context now, the last Great First. So this gentleman on the screen is Serena Shackleton, a great British polar explorer, and the first man to conceive of the crossing of Antarctica. After Roald Amundsen, the famous Norwegian explorer, planted the Norwegian flag in the South Pole, Shackleton said, "The crossing of Antarctica is the last great adventure in South Polar exploration." And it's a journey that's yet to be completed. This is a dinner party sketch that he sketched for someone when he was putting together his expedition, his crossing of Antarctica. And the eagle-eyed among you will see that it's upside down. And I've put it upside down because it essentially traces our journey into Antarctica alongside Shackleton's from South America. The story of the Endurance expedition has gone down in history as one of the greatest ever stories of human survival. Shackleton planned to sail in from South America into the Weddell Sea and set up camp on the Ronnie Filchner ice shelf. From there, he would attempt to make it to the South Pole and then further across the continent. A second team would sail in from New Zealand and set up camp on the Ross ice shelf side of the continent. They would lay depots of food and fuel all the way to the South Pole. So when Shackleton got to the South Pole, he would have everything that he needed to complete the crossing to the other side. And as the story goes, his ship, the Endurance, was held fast in the ice in the Weddell Sea and never actually made it to the continent of Antarctica. Eventually, the Endurance was lost and sunk. And Shackleton and his men made them one of the greatest escapes in history out of the Weddell Sea to South Georgia, where they were eventually rescued. And it has become one of the greatest stories of survival and leadership in adversity in human history. And it's this crossing of the continent that we will attempt to finish 110 years after it was first conceived. And just to reiterate, 2,600 kilometers is the same distance as from Adelaide to Cairns, but it's across some of the harshest environments on the planet. So once you decide to do such a great challenge, and you assemble, like as Rich said, you assemble an amazing team behind you to become your rock from which to work from. Then you've got to work out exactly how you do it, how you're going to do it from a physical and a mental perspective. And so our physical training requires dragging tires, heavy tires up and down beaches for hours and hours on end. Nothing copies dragging a heavy sled through snow like dragging a tire up a beach. But you not only have to be endurance fit, but you also have to be very strong. A 200 kilo sled, you have to be able to pull it out of crevasses, keep tipping it over when it flips over on big bits of ice. But we also have to be big and robust. So over 2,600 kilometers, we've got a bit of reserve and a bit of weight to lose as we go. And we'll talk a little bit about our food in a moment. And with a young family, and you'll meet Lucia and Arthur in a second, you got to grab training moments when you can. And this is me training with Arthur. He's having a nap in the capsule.
I think the physical preparation for an expedition like this is obviously absolutely key, but the psychological element to what we're doing is at least 50% of the game. I've got a young family in New Zealand as well. Being separated from them for such a long period of time is going to be really difficult. We have got to have the mental reserve and the psychological robustness to be able to get out of that tent, whatever the weather, knowing that we've got to ski into 100k an hour headwind for 26 kilometers, whether we like it or not, every day, one after another for 110 days, or else we're not going to make it. And preparing ourselves for that degree of sort of mental fortitude that's going to be required is really, really important. And we both have our sort of own different strategies for dealing with it. We can probably talk a bit more about this in the question and answer section, but we know that we've got to be mentally in the right headspace to go this. We've got to go there feeling positive about it. We've got to go there being able to cope with bad days. We will have really low days out there. We'll have really high days. And one of the reasons we know that we work together really well as a team is we tend to, for whatever reason, be out of sync with each other. So when I'm all depressed and grumpy and moaning that my feet hurt, Gareth is really good at just, cheering me up and telling me to get on with it. And when Gareth is all hangry because he's not eating his breakfast properly, I'm pretty good at chivvying him along and feeding him a Mars bar and poking him out the tent and making him get on with it. And, you know, we know that we work together well like this, and there's no way that we could be going into an expedition like this without spending a lot of time working out how we're going to survive psychologically and knowing that we have the sort of relationship as a team that will get us through this. I'm kind of thinking we're in Jindabyne, so it's going to be loads of people who know loads about kit and gear. This is quite exciting because everybody likes talking about gear. So this is the sort of thing that we're going to be skiing with. So you can see here, this is a kind of fairly standard Antarctic setup. It's a shame I can't go and poke these and you won't be able to hear me through the microphone, but we've got our cross-country skis, and we've got our great big polar boots, which you can see some examples of down on the table in front of me, and you can come and have a play with the kit at the end. We've got our jacket on, we've got a fur ruff around our jacket, we can put up in wind to make a little microclimate around your face to try and keep your face warm. We're attached with a harness around mostly around our waist. All the weight goes through your waist. You try not to take weight through your shoulders, it's just there for stability. Attached by what we call traces, the ropes that go back to our sleds. This is an old sled, it's not the one we're taking, but it's very similar to the ones that we'll be taking. It's about 210 centimeters long, and we're actually going to be dragging 2 of these. We spent a lot of time thinking about how best to deal with the load that we're carrying. So we're going to be pulling about 200 kilos when we set off, almost all of which is food and fuel. Our personal gear is 9.5 kilos or something. Almost everything else is food and gear and some emergency equipment. We decided that actually pulling 2 of these in train distributes that load better, despite the fact you have a little bit extra weight of the sled. So we're going to pull 2 of these along behind us. And that's essentially the setup that we're going to have. I reckon it'll probably be quite nice to touch a little bit more on equipment when we come to the end. But I think one thing that's worth saying is that, you know, every single item that we're taking with us has been incredibly detailed, thought through. We were talking to Neville earlier on, or something, might be Neville or somebody else. We were talking about our kit list, and they're saying, "Have you settled on everything yet?" And I said, "No, we haven't settled on loads of stuff. We know the big stuff. We know what skis we're using. We know what sleds we're using." But you know, we were driving down here with a spreadsheet open, changing our mind about how long the handle on the spoon that we're going to take is. You know, that's the level of detail that we're going down to, because there's this constant tension between taking spare equipment in case it breaks, taking novel, lightweight equipment, but knowing that it also has to be durable and survive and be robust and been tried and tested. So the type of gear that we're taking is a really, really key, important part of the expedition.
So the other key part of the expedition is food. We are going to have to eat 7,000 calories a day. So that's the equivalent of 15 Big Macs or 15 Domino's Meat Lovers pizzas. It's quite you know, a sobering thought. And some people liken these expeditions to an eating contest with a bit of skiing. It's our amazing team dietitian, my wife Andrea, has spent hours and hours poring over spreadsheets. If anyone wants to know the calorific content of any energy bar in the world, you can just ask her and she'll tell you. But seriously, getting 7,000 calories into 1 kilo packet of food per person per day is a scientific challenge. And we're at 1.16 at the moment, so we're doing really, really well. The majority of expedition teams will take between 1.2 and 1.3 kilos, but because we're trying to find every angle possible to make us successful in this expedition, and this is one of them. So in the mornings, we'll be eating a calorie-dense porridge, granola-y type breakfast, and then in the evening, we'll be having a really substantial calorie-dense meal. And those are the only hot meals that we'll have. And then during the day, we'll be eating various snack foods, energy bars, cheese, salami, a whole mix of different things. So we've got a bit of variety while meeting all our macronutrient targets, all our proteins and fats and carbohydrates, and also our micronutrients. So 3.5 months out there just on our own is easily enough time to get some of those age-old diseases, those vitamin deficiencies. And so we're very mindful of all those things. But getting our nutrition right, getting our 7,000 calories a day, which is it's just enough, but we can't afford to take any more food. It will mean that we will be able to sustain ourselves for the duration of the expedition. I talked a little bit before about putting on weight before we go. And really, our nutrition is designed so we can basically be big and resilient enough and keep the weight on to get all the way across Antarctica. And when we get to the South Pole, which is pretty much bang on halfway in terms of distance, we'll have a really good idea of our of how we're going physically and how we're doing with our nutrition plan. So.
You know, over the course of 110 days, all of our gear is going to take quite a battering, and we're certainly going to need to learn how to fix things pretty well. And, you know, we're pretty good at fixing bits of stoves. We're going to have to be able to replace ski bindings. We're going to have to be able to pretty much repair and fix everything we've got out of there. We can't afford to take loads of spares with us. So there's certainly going to be a degree of kind of MacGyvering things together once we're out there. This is in Svalbard. We were doing some training up on this island up in the Arctic Ocean back in March of this year. Up in Svalbard, there's loads of polar bears, which is luckily not a problem we're going to have in Antarctica. And so you have to have a tripwire around your camp attached to some flares in case a polar bear decides to come and have a nosy in the middle of the night. We'd actually, the wind set one of ours off in the middle of the night, but the explosives we're using for flares are slightly more powerful than we were expecting, and it blew the end off one of our flare stakes, and so we had to, you know, get out our medical kit, and we realised actually the strongest tape we had with us was our zinc oxide tape that's part of our medical kit, and we repaired the whole thing back with our zinc oxide kit, and it worked a lot better than it did before we broke it. But that's just an example of, you know, a light-hearted example of the sort of thing we're going to have to do when we're out there, because if we can't ski, we can't complete it. You know, say for example, looking at some of the details of some of the skiing equipment, there's a tiny little bar that sits in the toe of the ski boots that we use. And if that breaks and you can't fix it, that's you done, you know? So that's a degree of planning preparation that we've got to be aware of all those little things, because that's what success is going to hang on. It's going to hang on as detailed things as that. We've got to be able to fix, repair, improvise and adapt so that we can just keep on skiing.
So a lot of our time, especially the month that we spent in March in Svalbard, we immerse ourselves in the polar environment. We train and make ourselves, you know, safe in that environment, and put ourselves in a position to do well in Antarctica. So this, you can see in this photograph those stakes around the tent. Can't quite see the line, but that's the bare perimeter fence. Here we're hundreds of kilometers away from any point of civilization, really, up in the high part of Svalbard, and it's the calm after the storm. So basically, we had just spent 12 hours in the tent with 200-kilometer-an-hour winds, and those types of winds will flatten your tent completely. So we were in there for 12 hours with all our gear on, pushing the tent fabric off our faces, ready for the tent to basically rip and blow away, and for us to evacuate and, you know, put in place all our emergency plans. And, you know, we put ourselves in those positions. We train in those sorts of environments. So when we're thousands of kilometers away from any help in Antarctica, you know, we can respond. We've been there before. We know what to do. So I think we're going to show another short video of life on the ice, and then we're almost at the end of the presentation.
So essentially, it contains a ram that actually, as soon as you pull the trigger, there's a loud bang, and then there's a delay. There's the firing pin here, and the complex that will fire it. So, and then you've got the clipping wire, fixed clipping wire here.
Drawing out our sleeping bags. The concentration as we sleep, as we sweat in our sleeping bags, it makes the bags very damp and then they freeze.
I couldn't do this with my skis on. I had to stop and take my skis off and just hump it up in my boots. Gareth's giving it a go. Just getting a grip on the skins of the ski. It's just so hard. Oh. Oh.
The weather is terrible, so we had another sleepless night expecting the tent to be blown away. I'm not going to stand around too much recording. I'm going to get on and pack up my stuff so we can get out of here. But what a fun night! You slept full enough. It's not doing a bad job, actually. We've made it to Camp Barrett and the end of our expedition. Woohoo! Look at this. We have a habit of ending our expeditions in really random places.
So this is a timeline of the expedition. We're getting pretty close. We're only about sort of 8 weeks away now. Back in March of this year, we spent some time in Svalbard, which is where quite a lot of the footage you've seen has come from. Just doing our kind of final polar shakedown, spending some time in a polar environment in the cold, testing our gear, testing our systems, testing ourselves. We spent quite a bit of time in New Zealand this year. We had some training expedition earlier this winter in New Zealand. Got this opportunity in the Snowy Mountains. Then end of October or middle of October, we're heading to South America. Everything is sort of done logistically out of Punta Arenas in Chile. And then we'll be flying onto the ice at the end of October to begin our expedition at the beginning of November. And then all things going according to plan, we'll be finishing the expedition in the middle of February 2023.
And so in all these expeditions that we've done over the last 10 years, our families are, front and center. They're our rock. We try and involve them as much as possible. Rich and I both have young children. As I said, Arthur and Lucy are here, and they've, this is a photo from Iceland. We took them back to Iceland. Basically, we showed them the start of the expedition and all the bits of the route that we could get to and things. And so, as much as we want to inspire the scouts and young people all over the world, we also want to inspire our children to chase their dreams and whatever they're most passionate about. So we're just going to finish with a short video. We're attempting to be the first team in history to ski across the entire continent of Antarctica unsupported. It's on the brink of what's humanly possible. We'll have everything that we need to survive for 3.5 months in our sleds to cover 2,600 kilometers. This will not only be the first completely unsupported ski crossing of Antarctica, it will also be the longest unsupported ski expedition in polar history. Since 2013, when we skied together to the magnetic North Pole, this has been our big goal. Our friendship is based on trust and respect, and that forms the basis of our team. We need to be strong enough and endurance fit enough to drag a 200-kilo sled 10 hours a day. Rich and I are passionate adventurers, but first and foremost, we're doctors. So we put the expedition to one side to put all our time and focus to our patients and our colleagues and our families through what's been a very challenging period. We have the opportunity to achieve something that no one has ever achieved before, to push the boundaries of what's possible, to inspire a generation of young adventurers to chase what they're most passionate about, and through hard work, determination, resilience, they can achieve whatever they set out to. The more money we raise, the more support we can give to the Antarctic Science Foundation and to the Scouts, for the heroes of today and the youth of tomorrow.
We look forward to you joining our expedition family, and thank you for your support.
It's an expedition for Australia. It's an expedition for the Scouts. We would love for you to get behind us, support us as much as you can. Sign up for our newsletter on our website. Follow us on Instagram. There'll be live map and live announcements, and you can also donate for our website as well. So, and thank you so much for turning out and coming and listening to our presentation.
Thank you to Gareth and Rich. Sorry. We have a chance for some questions now. If you're on Zoom, the Q&A tab, hopefully we'll get to them. So if you've got any questions, call me over. With like a trip to Antarctica, do you need approval by anyone? Is there a visa or anything like that? Who's in charge of this? Is the question.
Yeah. So it's a really good question. So Antarctica is essentially governed by an international treaty. So everybody who goes there on an expedition has to have a permit from that organisation. So we've applied for. Actually got it yet, but it's a bit of a bureaucratic process. But yeah, we apply for a permit from the treaty organisation that governs access to Antarctica, and some of that is environmental due diligence and logistical due diligence and search and rescue.
You break the ski.
What happens if we break a ski? To be honest, it will probably be Rich if that happens. We take a spare set. So we don't take spares of many things. There are some essential things. Skis are one of them. We'll take a spare set of skis, a spare set of poles, ski poles, a spare stove, a spare sat phone, a spare solar panel, so we can charge all our equipment. But otherwise, most things we will only take one of them, and that comes back to what Rich was saying about having to think on our feet and fix a lot of things. But that's why one of the reasons why we're working with Arc'teryx as our kit sponsor. For 3.5 months, you only get one jacket, you only get one pair of trousers, so they've got to last. They've got to be the best to protect you outside. When your tent is your survival cell. When you're inside it, it can be -40 outside, and it can be 25 degrees in the tent. But when you're out of the tent, all you've got to survive is the layering that you're wearing. So it's so very important to get the best gear.
Choose Antarctica.
It's always the hardest question is why you're doing it, isn't it? Yeah, look, I guess the question, if you didn't hear it, was why did we choose Antarctica, and I guess why are we doing it at all? So I think for Gareth and I, we've always been driven to do these things because it's about being in these environments. It's not, neither of us, I don't think, are driven by being first to do something or being famous. We're driven to spend time immersed in these stunning, incredible environments. And fundamentally, what better way of experiencing that environment in its sort of total natural state than being out in it, in the entirety of the continent, crossing it from one side to the other, doing it in such a way that you're entirely dependent on your own skills, your own determination, and what you've got in a couple of sleds behind you to survive out there in this stunningly hostile but stunningly beautiful wilderness. So I guess that's what, that's our fundamental driver behind, why we've done all the things that we're doing and why we've chosen to do this expedition.
How long did it take you guys to get used to eating MREs?
MREs, did you say MREs? Yeah, look, it's taken a while. We've had some pretty bad ones, actually. So it's basically been a process of ticking off all the ones that we really don't like and getting to this point. We're actually, we discovered a small company in the UK that they design their own dehydrating process, basically. So what they do is in their own kitchen at home, they make homemade meals, they stick them straight in their dehydrating ovens, and then they stick them in a packet. So it's actually like the food that we're taking is like having a home cooked meal. They're some of the best outdoor meals that we've ever had, and it's so important. If you're doing it tough all day, you've got to have something in the evening that you're looking forward to. So the company is Firepot Food from Dorset in the UK, and they're really good. So thank you. That's a pretty good question.
We've got some questions from Zoom. So first one is, what are your plans to protect against frostbite?
Yeah, so I mean, frostbite is a real risk in Antarctica, and it's a common reason for the failure of expeditions. And I guess so much of it is about awareness. You know, we, on our expedition to the magnetic North Pole a few years ago, one of our expedition had to be evacuated, and he'd made this sort of classic mistake. You know, the golden rule is you don't have bare skin when you're outside. You know, once you've got, if it's still air temperatures kind of -20, it's actually not too bad, but you throw some decent wind on top of that, and suddenly once you've got wind chill, you're into -40, -50 territory pretty quickly. That sort of temperature where you just can't touch anything, you can't have bare skin showing at all. So say, for example, before we leave the tent in the morning, we have a buddy system. So we check each other, make sure we've got all our face masks on with our goggles, and there's not little gaps here, because it's really common you get these little gaps here or around the side of the faces here. And those are the bits where you're going to start to accumulate cold damage and get frostbite really quickly. And you can get frostbite in a few minutes and those sorts of temperatures. So you make sure you've got no exposed skin. Then you're outside, you always have things like gloves on. So we'll be using these great big down mitts, but inside the mitts we'll also be wearing gloves, so that if we have to, you know, try and get into some fiddly packet of food or have to fiddle with a bit of gear, you always got something protecting your hands. And also just being really, really aware of what you're doing. The guy that was evacuated from our North Pole trip, he got frustrated fixing a broken tent pole. And he just couldn't do it with his gloves on, and he's blowing a hoodie outside. We've been stormbound for the day, it was really cold, and he took his gloves off, sorted out the tent pole, went back inside, and you know, he was starting to struggle the next day, and we weren't quite sure what was going on. And a couple of days later, it was like, actually, guys, have a look at my fingers, and yeah, all the fingers of one of his hands were, you know, purple and swollen, and that had just taken him a couple of minutes because he just got frustrated with his gear. So a lot of it's about preparation, a lot of it's about just being really careful and about being aware and not letting yourself slip.
Just a second question for that one is, the 110 days, does that include the travel there and back, or is it just time on the ice?
No, it's just time on the ice. It's just time on the ice. So that's the goal. That's the way, the 2,600 kilometers. So if we do it in 100 days, we could have a bit of a buffer.
Hi, two questions. You mentioned 26 Ks over 100 days, or each day for 100 days. Have you built any buffer into that? Are you actually doing 26 Ks for 100 days, or you got some padding?
So the maximum time that we have to ski on this expedition is 110 days. And that's because that's the maximum amount of time that we can spend in Antarctica. We've got 110 days because we've negotiated with a logistics company to fly in early and to leave late. So at the end of the season, they will leave a plane and a small team with a doctor to get us out in the middle of February, when their normal season would end towards the end of January. That gives us the 110 days. And basically, we've broken it down to 26 kilometers a day by saying we're going to try and get it done in 100 and give us a buffer of 10 days. Those 10 days will go with storm days and days that we just get stuck in crevasse fields and various things. And you know, it's easy to paint the picture by saying it's 26 kilometers a day, because it breaks it down really nicely, but that will be averaged out across the expedition. Some days we'll go 15, especially when we're ascending from the Ross Ice Shelf to the polar plateau, over 150 kilometers up an unexplored glacier. You know, we're going to be going pretty slowly. But then conversely, at the end of the expedition, we get good conditions. We could be going 35, 40 kilometers a day with, you know, lighter sleds, nice snow conditions. So it'll all average out, hopefully. So, you know, the chances are we'll look like we're behind time when we reach the South Pole at the halfway point. But there's a very good chance we can catch up a lot of time towards the end of the expedition.
And just to add to that, that's a really important component for psychological preparation for it, because one of the hardest bits is going to be feeling like we're behind schedule at the start, when our heads of our sleds are their heaviest, the snow is at its softest, you know, and knowing that we're going to be hitting 15, 20 K a day for weeks at the start of the expedition, knowing that we then got to make it up at the end of it is something that we're really aware that we have to be psychologically prepared for at the start.
Cool. And the second question is, you mentioned earlier 7,000 calories a day. How diligent are you in actually ensuring that you do consume 7,000 calories a day? Other days where you just push and push and push and just skip a meal or two and then make that up, or do you just skip meals entirely, or are you just really good at just going, well, I don't feel like it, but I'm going to put much down on this food?
So everything in our food packet for the day gets eaten that day. If we don't eat it, then I'll have my wife to answer to when we get home. Look, it's we're approaching this expedition with military precision. So every meal gets eaten, every calorie gets consumed during the day, and we're bulking up our calories by taking 60 ml packets of olive oil that we'll drink, and reconstitute avocado powder, and all that stuff is pretty unpleasant, but you just got to eat it. Otherwise we just won't make it. It's really is if we start skipping calories or skipping meals, it will end the expedition early and we won't be successful. And in terms of our strategy across a day, we'll be up at 6 o'clock. The tent will be down and we'll be on our skis by 8 a.m. And then from 8 till 6, we'll ski for an hour and a half with 10-minute breaks. In those 10-minute breaks, we'll eat and drink as much as we can, because you just can't eat and drink when you're skiing. That 10 minutes is just long enough to get really cold, and then we'll be off again. In the evenings, we'll have 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. So 4 hours of eating, resting, writing journals, fixing kit, and then we're in our sleeping bags and we're asleep by 10 p.m. and we're up again at 6. And that's an unbroken, hallowed 8 hours of sleep, because we've done the calculations of other teams in the past, and when they tack on an extra hour at the end of the day or an extra 2 hours and they start chipping into their sleep and their rest times, it's really detrimental. They don't go particularly fast. They don't make much more distance at the end of those days. So that's our strategy, and we'll keep to it. Absolutely. Great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just to check the question. So what's our contingency plan if something goes wrong? Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's an excellent question, because it's certainly possible. A really important part of the planning of this is to make sure that for pretty much the entire expedition, there is a rescue plan that's available. And to be honest, it's required by sort of logistical companies and insurers and things. And essentially, we'll have satellite telephones with us. We'll have 2 satellite telephones, so you've got a backup. You have to have voice communication and 2 methods of voice communication with the base. And we call in at set times every day to a base camp team. And the reason that they want voice communication is because they can learn an awful lot by the tone of our voice. It's not just saying we're fine, everybody says they're fine, but how do you say you're fine? And they want to be able to hear our voices every day. So we'll have 2 satellite phones, we'll have that regular check-in. We'll also carry, so we can call for help if we're able to, we'll also carry locator beacons that we can set off, and we'll have GPS, a 3rd separate GPS tracking system for the whole way as well. Essentially, a plane with skis can land pretty much anywhere in Antarctica. If it can't land near you, it might also have to have guys on skis or skidoos that can come and get you if something goes wrong in the crevasse field. Particularly some of those the glacial components through the transantarctic mountains, you might not be able to get a plane in. But all of those things are there so that if something do go wrong, then people can get in and rescue us, and that's the benefit of doing this with modern technology. It might, however, be quite weather dependent, and we might be several days before that rescue will actually materialize.
So on the actually on the topic of emergencies, what are you guys carrying in terms of emergency equipment?
To be honest, despite the fact that we're both sort of doctors, we're not carrying that much more than sort of lay people would carry. I guess there's not much you can do out there with, for us to do all our clever stuff with machines really. And we'll have a lot of medications. We'll be very aware of treating, infections, things like, athlete's foot, stuff like that can really wear you down over long periods of time. So a lot of our strategy about looking after us is using some of those medical skills that we have to look after each other, assess what the other one is like, so that you sort of being a bit objective about it, and intervening in stuff really early. So making sure we stay really hot on blisters, foot care, bit of athlete's foot, or other bits of chafage and rubbish and little infections and stuff, and just intervening in those sorts of things early. We're not going to be using anything super clever. We'll have antibiotics and some antifungal medications and some wound dressings and blister preparations and things like that. But it's not going to be any sort of super fancy bits of equipment.
And to wrap up the Zoom questions, if you had one piece of adventure advice to young scouts, what would it be?
I would say find that thing that you're most passionate about. Find that adventure that you really want to go on, and just go and do it. And surround yourself with positive people. Surround yourself with people that will support you, because it's possible. And you just need to make a plan. You just need to break it down into something that's manageable, and just go for it. So find that thing that you really love and just go for it.
Do you know at all how many time zones you might go through or anything like that?
I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, I actually don't know. It gets really, Antarctica is a weird, zany place. So it's divided, I mentioned before, it's an international treaty, but it's then divided into national segments. And traditionally, each segment will follow the time zone of the country that it's from. But you've got, there's chunks of it that are British and chunks of which is, Britain's a long way from Antarctica. There's chunks of it that are Chilean, chunks of it that are Japanese and stuff. So they tend to stick on their own time zones. We'll essentially just have our own time zone. It'll be 24-hour daylight when we're there. So we'll just set our watches at the start, and then we will just follow our own 24-hour cycle as we go. We won't worry about time zones.
After your olive oil, do you carry toilet paper, and where do you deposit your dookies?
Glad it's Gareth's turn to answer that question.
Obviously, we take toilet paper. Everything that comes in with us goes out with us. So apart from human waste, toilet paper will come out with us around the last degree, around the South Pole. Even the human waste will come out. It's something that we've spoken about. Our impact and our footprint on Antarctica. We want to leave it as pristine as possible, but it's just not possible for us to take absolutely everything out. And in terms of the environmental impact of what we will leave behind, it's vanishingly small. So that's how we're approaching the exhibition. You just have to go really quickly and not into the wind, basically.
Thank you, Gareth and Rich, for the presentation and answering our questions. I would like now to introduce Neville Tompkins, OIM, Chief Commissioner of Scouts New South Wales, for a short presentation.
Well, thank you, Molly, and good evening to you all. As the Chief Commissioner of Scouts New South Wales, can I say that we are incredibly proud to be partnering with what I believe to be one of the most exciting expeditions that we've been involved with in our 114-year history. I start by acknowledging the original inhabitants of the land on which we meet tonight. Like you, I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Can I say that my pride is also with our young people tonight? To Maddie, to Nat and Joe, to Eleanor. Eleanor, of course, is the chair of the National Rover Council. To our rovers that we'll hear from very shortly, to Molly, all the way from First Broken Hill Scout Group, and to Dan and to Jess. Please, can I ask each of you to stand, because I think you deserve a special round of applause. And can I also say, as one scouter to another scouter, how pleased we are that we have tonight our two explorers in Scout uniform. And I'm also going to invite the expedition's chair, Mr. Mark Richardson, to come forward, also in Scout uniform. And what you will see behind us on the slide is one of our most exciting events of this year. What you see on the slide there is the investiture of our 3 newest ambassadors of Scouts Australia at Government House on Friday, the 27th of May. This was a significant occasion, not just for Scouts, not just for our 3 great Australians here. It was a great day for Scouting. Because what we've heard tonight is the very ethos of the Scouting spirit, which I'll talk about shortly. But what our Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia and the Chief Scout of Australia, what he said that afternoon within the drawing room of Government House will stay with me forever. And that is, in looking at our 3 ambassadors, he said to them, do not underestimate the significance of your expedition. Its significance is equivalent to the man's mission to the moon. Neil Armstrong was a scout. In front of you tonight, we have 3 great scouts. But this expedition is an inspiration at so many levels. Firstly, it's a story of extraordinary human endeavour. The first unsupported ski crossing of the Antarctic, 2,600 kilometres, pulling 200 kilogram sleds. It's also a story of extraordinary expedition, traversing the last uncharted continent of this planet. It's also a story of extraordinary kinship, of battling some of the most hostile weather conditions on this planet, with only their true friend and their mate to support them. This is, in my view, one of the greatest scouting expeditions that we could ever consider. It underpins, in my view, the true spirit of scouting, the spirit of adventure, the spirit of the great outdoors, of measured risk-taking as each of us chase our dreams, the spirit of looking wide, the spirit of respect for the environment, but importantly, the spirit of personal development, of community and kinship, and the support for each other. This adventure is a powerful statement of our motto: be prepared, plan, do, and review. Scouts Australia, Scouts New South Wales, we are incredibly proud to be associated with such an exciting adventure, an inspiration to at least 73,000 young people, part of the scouting movement here in Australia, together with their leaders. An inspiration to all of our young people and their parents tonight who are not yet part of the Scout movement. But we would like to thank each one of you for your support of this inspirational story. And I'd like to invite two of our youngest representatives from the first Kosciuszko Scout group to come forward and present a small memento to our three great Australians. Three great Australians who are going to be writing themselves into history and be truly great Australians when they return safely to their homes, to their families, and to the scouting community in February 2023. And as we invite our two youngest scouts to make this presentation, I'd like to also invite Gareth's family, his wife Andrea, and their two beautiful children, Arthur and Lucia, to come forward. Because as all of us in scouting, we cannot follow our dreams without the support of our family. So please, a huge round of applause for these great Australians, their families. And I'd like to invite our two scouts to come forward and present this plaque from Scouts Australia, Scouts New South Wales, and we wish you all great success, and we look forward to seeing you in February 2023. Thank you.
Please welcome to come and have a look at the equipment. Ask questions after.
Need to have a great experience in the outdoor world with all their activities from rock climbing and bushwalking in the summer to building snow caves in the winter. Anything and everything is possible in Scouts. So if anyone would be interested in joining Scouts, then come join us on Monday, 5:45 to 7:45 next term, as we only operate in third term, first, second, and fourth term of school because we're too busy skiing in third term, of course. Also, our Scout Hall is located opposite the Alpine Activity Centre, if you don't already know. If you would like to support the Last Great First, you can donate online and or go to their pop-up shop on the way out, and the refreshments are right.
As well, there are 10 lucky door prizes. Check the bottom of your chairs for a postcard with a number and come to the front to collect. We would also like to thank our online audience and to Snowy Mountains Grammar School for hosting us physically and virtually. Thank you.